At my dad's retirement party, I arrived with my kids holding a handmade banner. My mom walked out and said, "She's not in the mood for surprises, maybe next time." I nodded, turned around, and left without a word. An hour later, my younger brother texted, "Why did you cancel the catering contract?" She's panicking. I was at my parents' house when I finally couldn't take it anymore. I hadn't planned it, but they had gone too far. The children were with me, sitting quietly on the sofa, while my mother, as usual, wouldn't shut up, listing all my failures in life. My father, as usual, added that I was lucky they were even talking to me, considering how pathetic I had become. I didn't argue. I just sat and listened. But something inside me snapped. Not like a sudden explosion, but more like an old beam that finally broke under excessive weight. At that moment, their easy, carefree life ended. I got up, told the kids we were leaving, and didn't even bother to say goodbye. On the way home, which was only a few blocks away, I couldn't stop thinking about all the years I had allowed this to continue. About every insult. About every demand. Every time they called me worthless, spending my money. My brother's education, my mother's purchases, my father's endless car repairs. I financed it all. And they acted as if it was my duty. It was over. I didn't even wait. As soon as we got home, I changed all my online banking passwords. I cancelled the automatic transfers I sent to my mother every month. I paid for my brother's college tuition like clockwork. But the next payment? It will never happen. It wasn't even about the money. It was about finally breaking the rope that had been strangling me for years. I didn't call them. I didn't respond to their messages. The next morning, my brother showed up at my door. He asked why the tuition hadn't been paid. I told him I wasn't going to pay. He laughed as if I were joking. I wasn't joking. My parents quickly found out. First came angry messages, then phone calls, then voicemails designed to make me feel guilty. I didn't respond to any of them. The best part was that I knew exactly how it would end. They weren't just angry, they were confused. It wasn't like me. I had never refused before. But this time, no was just the beginning. By the second day, they started showing up at my house. First my mother, banging on the door like she owned the place. She didn't even ask how the kids were, just started in about how irresponsible I was, letting my brother's future get flushed down the drain. She said I was acting like a stranger. I told her I'd been a stranger to them for years, apparently, since they only remembered I existed when they needed something. She didn't like that. She left in a storm, threatening to send my father next. I said nothing and closed the door. Sure enough, the next day, my father was there. He stood on the porch, telling me through the screen that family doesn't abandon family, and that I was being dramatic. I reminded him he hadn't paid for a single thing in this house, yet somehow felt comfortable telling me how to live in it. He told me I'd regret this. The funny thing was, I didn't feel anything. No guilt. No second thoughts. The kids noticed the silence too. They even seemed calmer, like the air in the house wasn't heavy anymore. By the end of the week, my brother sent me a text saying he'd have to drop out of college if I didn't pay soon. I replied that he better start looking for a job then. He didn't respond. Then things started getting worse for them. My father's car broke down. He couldn't afford the repairs and couldn't borrow my car because I told him to rent one if it was that important. My mother called saying the utility bills at their house were piling up. She asked me to cover them just for this month. I said no. They didn't believe me. They thought I was just being dramatic, that I'd come around. But I wasn't playing a role this time. I meant it. And just to make sure they understood, I logged into my accounts and finally removed them as authorized users on anything they could still touch. I'd left them scraps for too long. This was just the beginning. I wanted them to feel the slow burn. They held out longer than I expected, but the cracks started to show. My mother tried acting like nothing was wrong when I saw her in the neighborhood. She even waved once like we were still on speaking terms. But then I heard from a neighbor that the power had been cut off at their place for a few days. My father swallowed his pride long enough to send me a message asking for a small loan to get through the month. I didn't even reply. Then my brother posted something pathetic on social media about how people who abandon family will get what's coming to them. I didn't comment, but I sent the screenshot to my friend Lisa with the caption, "Karma's just getting warmed up." A week later, I started getting the late-night calls. They wouldn't leave messages, but I knew it was them. My mother called 16 times in one night. Then the texts came, half insults, half begging. They still didn't understand that nothing was going back to the way it was. Then I did the one thing I knew would tip them over the edge. I posted publicly that I wasn't paying for my brother's college anymore. I made it clear that I was done supporting adults who should have been responsible for themselves by now. I didn't name names, but everyone who knew us knew who I was talking about. It was the first time I'd said it out loud. I'm not your wallet. That's when my mother lost it. She showed up at my door screaming that I was ruining their lives. That they'd raised me, and I owed them. I told her no, my husband and I raised our kids. I told her that when he died in the war, they didn't even bother to show up, so what did I owe them, exactly? She slapped me. I smiled. I closed the door in her face. I think that was the first time it hit her. Something in her face changed, like she knew there was no getting through to me anymore. And I wasn't done yet. After that day, the silence stretched longer than I expected. For a moment I thought maybe they'd finally given up. But then I got a letter in the mail. Handwritten, like it was the 90s or something. My father. He said they were struggling. That my brother was out of college, sitting around the house, bitter and angry. That the bills were piling up, the car was dead, and they didn't know how much longer they could stay afloat. He said I'd made my point, but it was time to stop being childish. I threw the letter away without finishing it. I was past the point of explanations. Every word from them was just noise. I went on with my life, took the kids out more, focused on my work. The weird thing was, my income started growing. Fewer distractions, fewer demands, fewer ungrateful mouths to feed. I even picked up an extra client and started seeing real money come in for the first time in a while. Then one morning, I heard from Lisa again. She sent me a picture of my parents' house with a bright red sticker on the door. Utility shut-off notice. Water, power, gas. She said the neighbor told her they'd been arguing outside the night before, loud enough for the whole block to hear. I can't lie. I laughed. But it got better. A week later, my brother tried to call me. I didn't answer, but he left a voicemail saying he was moving out. He couldn't take living with them anymore. He had no money, no job, no degree, nothing. And it was all my fault. I didn't delete that voicemail. Sometimes I played it back just to remind myself how deep they'd sunk. Then I made a decision. I was done living this close to them. Same neighborhood, same streets, same chance of running into them at the grocery store. I started looking for apartments in another city. Somewhere fresh. Somewhere none of them could just show up on my porch. I kept it quiet, didn't tell the kids yet. But I started preparing. And while I was at it, I called a realtor. I told them I was thinking about selling my house. The realtor came by a few days later. We walked through the house, room by room, while she pointed out a few things I could fix up before listing. The kids were excited when I told them we might be moving soon. They asked if Grandma and Grandpa would come visit us there. I said no. I meant it. Meanwhile, my parents must have gotten wind of something. Maybe from the neighbors or maybe they just sensed it. But the texts started again. This time from my father. He asked if I was really going to sell the house. He said if I left, they'd have nobody. Exactly. Then my mother texted. She said moving was stupid, I was running away, and if I thought I was cutting them off for good, I was delusional. She ended it with the classic, "You'll come crawling back when life gets hard." I didn't reply. But I did call the realtor back and told her to officially list the house. Around the same time, Lisa told me my parents had started asking around the neighborhood if anyone knew a cheap handyman because things were falling apart at their place. Roof leaks, plumbing issues, even the old water heater giving out. I knew they didn't have the money to fix any of it. One night, a neighbor sent me a video of them dragging furniture out to the curb. They were selling whatever they could for cash. I watched it twice. My father yelling at my mother blaming my brother standing off to the side on his phone, not helping at all. It was better than TV. My brother eventually moved out. I don't know where he went. Last I heard, he was crashing with a friend, barely working part-time. As for my parents, I didn't care enough to check. I had my own plans. The realtor called and said we had some offers coming in already. That was all I needed to hear. It was almost time to go. The morning I accepted the offer on the house, I stood in the kitchen drinking coffee, just staring out the window. I'd lived there for over a decade. My husband and I bought it before the kids were born. He'd wanted to turn the basement into a movie room. I never got around to it after he died. It felt right to let it go. When I told the kids we were moving for real, they were excited. New city, new school, new everything. They asked if we'd come back to visit. I told them no. There was nothing left here for us. I didn't bother telling my parents. I knew they'd find out when the for sale sign came down and strangers moved in. I half expected them to show up, maybe try one last guilt trip, but they didn't. Instead, on the day I signed the final papers, I got a text from my father. Just one sentence. "You'll regret this." I stared at it for a while. Then I deleted his number. The move itself wasn't even stressful. I rented a small house in the new city, just enough space for the kids and me. I didn't need anything bigger. I'd already packed light, just the essentials, no dead weight. When we arrived, I remember standing in the empty living room, feeling like I could breathe for the first time in years. The kids ran around claiming their rooms. I sat on the floor, smiling. I never heard from my parents again. No calls, no texts, nothing. They didn't even try. Maybe they were too proud. Maybe their lives had finally fallen apart completely. Maybe they were too broke to afford a phone bill. Either way, I didn't care. Sometimes I check my old neighborhood online just out of curiosity. Last I saw, their house was still falling apart. Grass overgrown, windows cracked, junk on the porch. A fitting monument to the life they built for themselves. As for me, I'm doing better. I got another raise, the kids are happy, and I finally started sleeping through the night. Turns out, the only thing I regret is not doing it sooner.